Hi, I'm Berthold Gambrel, and I'm here with Peter Martuneac, who is the author of Mandate of Heaven, a new adventure book. And he is also the author of the already released His Name Was Zach zombie dystopia series. Um, Peter, why don't you start by just telling us what Mandate of Heaven is about?
All right, yeah. So Mandate of Heaven is book one in the Ethan Chase series of thrillers, and it's a treasure hunting series. Fans of Indiana Jones, the Uncharted video games, Andy McDermott thrillers will will probably be the same audience who would appreciate these new books. Mandate of Heaven specifically, the hero Ethan Chase is after a ancient Chinese seal called the heirloom seal of the realm, which was in fact a real Chinese artifact.
Um, did you have to do a lot of research to pick that real artifact, or was that something you had
Yeah,
all along?
yeah, I did some research on it. For the first book, I didn't want to go too formulaic. There's the Ark of the Covenant, the Holy Grail, things like that, which are kind of your run of the mill treasures for thrillers. I wanted to go a little off the beaten path and find a treasure that maybe hasn't been found in books or movies before. So I came across the heirloom seal of the realm. I thought it sounded really cool. And I started thinking about the different things I could do with it, and it just kind of went from there.
So, was this a story that was inspired by this artifact, or did the characters come first, or how did the story originally come to your mind?
The characters came first. I've been wanting to write stories since I was 12 years old, and I read The Lord of the Rings for the first time. So I've for 20 years now, I've been having story ideas go through my mind, and this one was it originally started 7 years ago. I wrote down a few pages of what would be a treasure hunting novel. I just didn't have a good direction with it at that time. I was still new to writing seriously, so I shelved it. And then once I published His Name Was Zach and those sequels, I felt a little more comfortable with my writings. I decided to go back to some of these old drafts that I'd begun. This one seemed like a good one. I felt pretty good that I had the skills to make a compelling story. So I took that character back, plucked him in a new timeline essentially, and that's when I got to the heirloom seal of the realm, and the rest of that is history.
Cool. So, you mentioned Lord of the Rings. I know you're a big Lord of the Rings fan.
Yes.
So, this is one question that crossed my mind. Suppose that uh, through magic or whatever, you could talk to J.R.R. Tolkien. What would you ask him?
Oh man. Honestly, this wouldn't even be a book question. I think I would want to talk to him. I think I'd want to talk to him about his experiences in the war, in the Great War. For those who don't know, I was a United States Marine for 4 years in an infantry battalion. I was in Afghanistan twice. Obviously, didn't see anything like the carnage of the Great War. Uh, but I guess I'd like to talk to him about that, his experiences, and I guess how he coped with everything.
That makes sense. That would definitely be a good question to ask. So, given that, I know Ethan Chase, the character, is also a veteran.
Yes.
How does your background shape writing a character like that? How much does that inform it?
So his character is an extreme reaction to my experiences. Ethan Chase is an ex-Army Ranger. You usually only say ex-soldier, ex-Marine if it's a very negative connotation, such as desertion, which is what this character did. He deserted from the Army. He had his reasons, which you'll see if you read the book. But mostly he was disillusioned with the war in Afghanistan and how it was going, and ultimately through a series of events from both from his childhood and in his current state in the army, he just decided that the right thing for him to do was to just leave and never look back. So that's, and when I was deployed in Afghanistan through a series of events, started seeing that, hold on, this isn't as black and white as I thought it was when I was a teenager. And that's why I started having my doubts. And obviously, I did not desert from the Marine Corps. That's a poor decision, I think, made by Ethan. A little bit of a fun fact for you here: there's actually a crossover between Ethan Chase's series of books and his name was Zach series of books. They don't meet directly, but if you've read His Name Was Zach and you read Mandate of Heaven, you'll see there's a crossing of the timelines at a certain event.
I love it. I love things like that. And that's a good opportunity also, because I'd also like to talk to you a little bit about the His Name Was Zach series.
Yes.
So a similar question, how did that series come about? Well, I guess first, for those who don't know, tell us a little bit about what the series is, and then.
Okay. Yeah. So it's a zombie apocalypse series. It follows Zach. He's a former Marine, and his adoptive daughter Abby. She's a 14-year-old girl. They found each other in the early days of the zombie breakout, and the story is ultimately about their survival together. I tried I tried to steer away from some of the cliches of like The Walking Dead, and not all cliches are bad. You need cliches because people expect those things. But I tried to stay away from the love triangles, the power struggles and survival groups, and make it just about a father and daughter surviving together, basically. Um, and and for those who care, they're fast zombies. They're not slow zombies. I know some people are very particular about the kind of zombies they will read or watch. So these are the fast ones. But for that book, I don't exactly remember the aha moment that brought it to be. I remember I started with the ending of book one. I had the final scene in my mind, and I thought that sounded good. So I went back and said, okay, how do I get there? And I just kind of, I'm not a plotter. What's the term in the writing? Pantser, I think they call it. You write by the seat of your pants. That series was definitely more pantsed than planned.
I can see that without giving anything away to people out there. The ending scene is, I think that's the scene almost everybody who reads that book really, it sticks with them, that ending. So
I hope so. My friend Curtis Ferrier, he was in my platoon. He's also mentioned in the book, and he dies. He wanted to die in that book, so I told him, "All right, I'll kill you." So the names of the Marines in that book are actually all Marines who were in my platoon. They all said they wanted to be in the book, so I was like, "All right, I'll put you in there." But yeah, he read the book chapter by chapter as I wrote it, the first draft, and yeah, the ending kind of took him by surprise. He, don't want to give anything away, but he was a little shocked by it.
now, did you always envision that as the whole series that it turned into, or were the other books that came later?
No, originally it was standalone. I wrote it. You've read it, so you again. I don't want to give anything away about the ending, but you have read it. I know Berthold, so you know that the ending is kind of open. If you didn't know there were sequels coming, it's one of those open endings where okay, maybe this happens, maybe that happens. I don't know. The book just ended. So I left it open ended because I wanted it to be like the reader can conclude the story as he or she sees fit. And then after a couple weeks, I was still deployed. I wrote this while I was deployed, by the way. Wrote it entirely by hand. I was in Afghanistan, writing out notebooks, and I was still there when it finished. So a couple weeks went by, not a whole lot to do. So I thought, you know what? I don't want the story to end there. So I'm the author. I can make more books. I'm going to do that.
So you wrote it by hand in Afghanistan.
Yes, the first draft. I still have it somewhere in a bin in the garage somewhere. But yeah, it was written entirely by hand on 3 different notebooks. It was a long book.
Wow, that's impressive. I'm terrible at writing by hand.
Yeah, I don't know how I accurately typed it up because my handwriting is just not the best.
So what would you say are differences in like the process of writing an adventure story like Mandate of Heaven versus writing a sort of darker zombie book like His Name Was Zach?
Well, for one thing, for sure, the adventure series required a lot more research. With a zombie book, I mean, you're talking about zombies, so you're already off in imagination land. So it's a lot of just conjuring up, like, what do I want to happen? What do I think could be realistic? Making an adventure series within the realms of possibility, you need to be a little more careful. You can't be quite as creative as you are in a fully imaginative series. So you do need to be a bit more careful about things like loopholes, realism, both like time, the time it takes to get from A to B, things like that. You have to be careful about that. And then, yeah, the mindset. His Name Was Zach is definitely a darker series. It's about plumbing the depths of human depravity. If humans left to their own devices, if no one's there to make them be good, how bad can some people be? So it was a little hard to write some parts of those books just because it does get a little dark and depressing. As far as writing the Ethan Chase though, it's a little bit easier. There is some dark side to it. Obviously, there's struggles, there's dilemmas, there's evil. But it's a little bit easier to come out of it. There was one scene in particular in Her Name Was Abby, the sequel to His Name Was Zach. Upon finishing it, I was kind of bummed out the rest of the day because it was just kind of a depressing scene to write. So I wasn't in a great mental space the rest of the day.
Gotcha. Um, I was going to ask for, especially with regard to Mandate of Heaven, do you ever have a situation where you're trading off making something believable versus making it dramatically exciting? And how do you handle a situation like that?
Yeah, that's one of my biggest problems as an author is trying to find the right balance between believability and, fiction, essentially. I tend to be my own harshest critic. I search endlessly for plot holes and try to close them up as best I can. And that can really you can really handcuff yourself as an author if you look for plot holes too hard. And it sounds like it's like bad advice to say don't worry about realism, but people are reading a fiction book, so there is a line we have to say, okay, this might not be super realistic, but it's fiction, so just go with it, please, to the reader. And the important thing to remember is I have to remind myself that when I'm a reader and reading a book of fiction, um, I tend to be pretty forgiving. I'll read something and sometimes I think, oh man, that wouldn't happen. That's not right. But I'm enjoying the book, so I'm like, whatever, I don't care. So I had to remind myself that a lot of readers out there, they're not going to be. Readers aren't looking for loopholes technically, unless they're smacked in the face with loopholes. Then you have a problem. But they're not reading your book to find errors. They're reading your book to be entertained. So you do have to. You want it to be realistic, obviously, but you also have to remember that readers they're willing to be fooled a little bit. They're willing to put aside sensibility and common sense a little bit to be entertained.
As a reader, what is something that would break your immersion or make you just, throw the book at the wall and be like, read this?
uh, well, for me personally, it tends to be military or gun related things. The easiest way to get me out of a story is to talk about a character inserting a clip into a gun because 99% of guns use magazines, not clips. And it's a really silly thing, but to me, it's like that's basic research. You can figure that out very quickly.
I'm amazed how many books I see that in too.
Yeah, it's just to me that's just a little bit lazy when we're living in the information age. I try to Google things that I'm not totally up and up about. If I'm not super familiar with the topic, I try to get the basics of it so I don't make a really dumb mistakes. I feel like if you're talking about guns in your books and you're not familiar with guns, do a little bit of Googling about that. So I guess basic research is all I ask for. Like, don't make really obvious. If you're writing a book about Marines, don't talk about I don't know. Don't have them say, you know, aye aye sergeant to a gunnery sergeant. In the Army, they say sergeant for everyone, sergeant and above. Even if they're a master sergeant, apparently they just call them all a sergeant. And the Marine Corps, it's not like that. You have sergeants, you have staff sergeants, you have gunnery sergeants, and you say the whole thing. You don't just say, yes, Sarge. So
That's a good one to keep in mind. So what is something that has surprised you the most about being a writer? Like when you look back, what were you not expecting when you started out?
Well, I was not expecting to actually get a published book done with Mandate of Heaven. I was getting ready to self-publish the series. I had contacted, I don't know, probably at least 2 dozen agents and publishers in 2 different rounds of submissions. A lot of agents and publishers I felt really good about. I found men and women who were their requirements and their preferences were right in line with what I had. And I thought, oh, this is going to be the one here. And I either never heard back or they said no thanks. So I guess actually getting a published book through Evolved Publishing is the biggest surprise. I was happy to self-publish. It's very fulfilling to self-publish. To have it done, almost entirely by yourself with the help of maybe some beta readers and editors. But it's always you, so it's very fulfilling to have your own book out to market as a self-published author. But of course, having someone request to publish your book is the dream for every author. So getting that was kind of nice. I never expected that, so it was nice.
That has to be a really good feeling, especially for something you've worked for a long time at, to get someone to say yes, we are.
It did feel nice, yes.
Yeah, that's got to be very, very satisfying. So I like to ask everybody their favorite books. Now, in your case, I know one answer is going to be Lord of the Rings. I know that, and it's okay to talk a bit about that. But I'm going to also ask for something else besides Lord of the Rings.
All right, yeah. While I side mind think of that, yeah, the Lord of the Rings, just perfect in every way imaginable. I don't care what you say. There's nothing wrong with the Lord of the Rings at any point. I don't care if Frodo could have taken the Eagles to Mordor. I don't care if Gandalf is Jesus. I just don't care. All right, it's perfect. They're perfect books. Um, and the Rings of Power on Amazon is pretty good so far. If anyone's watching that, I have been enjoying that. I think it's more for the nerds. If you're a casual fan, you might not like it too much, but I'm enjoying it.
And
Um,
I know the answer to this, but just for others out there, how do you feel about Peter Jackson's movies?
I'm sorry.
How do you feel about the Peter Jackson movies of Lord of the Rings?
Again, perfection. I mean, it's those movies came at the perfect time to be right in the. It was at the perfect time to have some old school film techniques, to have those um, old school styles of filming, of costuming, of all of that, and also just on the cutting edge of some 21st century CGI, just enough to put gilding around the edges of the real effects. I wrote a 3-piece review of the Lord of the Rings movies on my blog, and I conclude that they are essentially perfect. Again, like the books. I even looking objectively for flaws, it's hard to find them. I think they're just, you can't top what Peter Jackson did with the Lord of the Rings. I'm sure at some point down the line they'll be redone, but I can't imagine they'll be better than what Peter Jackson did. Um, Favorite books, I'm gonna go with the Seven Deadly Wonders. That is the that's what's the name of the main character? Jack West Jr., the Jack West Jr. series of books. The first in that series is called Seven Deadly Wonders. That's also actually a treasure hunting series. And the first book focuses on a team of special forces soldiers from some different countries in a race against another set of countries to find the capstone to the Great Pyramid of Giza. The legend says that whoever places the capstone atop the pyramid at a certain time would basically have world-conquering powers. So those books, Jack West Jr., Seven Deadly Wonders, I really enjoyed reading those.
Cool. That does sound good. I've not heard that series.
Yeah, it's not super popular. I'm trying to remember the name. I always forget the name of the author. It's very similar to another author's name. That's why I always forget exactly what it is, and I don't want to say it because it'd probably be wrong. But the main character is Jack West Jr., and I really enjoy those books.
Cool. And those would be ones you would say that probably influenced you a bit as you're writing Mandate of.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Jack West Jr. books, Andy McDermott's thrillers, the Uncharted video games, Indiana Jones. Those all definitely are things that I've enjoyed in my lifetime. Those definitely, you write how you read, as they say. So they definitely had an influence on the writing of this series.
Um, so is there anything else that you would want your readers to know, like when they're reading, well, either when they're reading Mandate of Heaven or when they're reading His Name Was Zach?
Um, First things first, thank you if you're reading those. I really appreciate it. You have a lot of literally billions of choices for books. So if anyone picks mine up, I'm appreciative of it. As far as the books, particularly, like I said, His Name Was Zach it's a little bit more of a niche book. You have to have a certain taste, I guess, to enjoy it as far as zombies, and it's pretty dark for most of it. I like to tell people it's very dark, but it leads to a happy, rosy ending. Trust me, it gets happy. You just have to wade through some depressing bits to get there. As for Mandate of Heaven, like I said, it's a treasure hunting series. It's on the lighter, more realistic side. I guess reading those books just that's the kind of thing I'd want people to bring on a plane to read while they're going somewhere, to read at the pool side while they're enjoying their summer. I made that one a bit more wide ranging for enjoyment. Try to get it to the so more people could enjoy it basically.
I think yeah, those are books that really have wide appeal. Now, having said that, I mean, I don't particularly like zombie dystopia books, but I still enjoyed His Name Was Zach series.
And that's the weird thing. I feel like the best reviews from His Name Was Zach came from people who don't really like zombie books in general. So maybe I'm not good at writing zombie fiction.
Well,
Maybe that's my problem.
it's probably that people, like you said, are hung up on like, well, are they, I like slow zombies. Why aren't they slow zombies or something like
It
that?
is a little bit. There's a particularly scathing review on Amazon. It's not terrible. He's fair in his assessment, I guess. But this particular reviewer really prefers slow, mumbling zombies, and I hate those zombies, and I will never write about slow zombies. So
Well, they're not terribly scary, I guess.
no, I
Just
mean
run
I guess
away.
that's what I've always thought. I'm like, I'm just gonna power walk out of the way. Like, what's a walking zombie gonna do to me? That's just my opinion.
But hey, whatever people like. At least,
Yeah, yeah.
I always say with negative reviews, at least they read the book and they cared enough to review it, even if they didn't like it.
Exactly. If anyone ever tells me they're reading my books, I'm just an acquaintance or work friend, I ask them, hey, leave a review, even if it's just one sentence, and you say, I didn't like it. Like, it helps.
Exactly, exactly. Um, so the book is Mandate of Heaven. It's the first in the series, right? It's going to be three
Yes.
books. Uh,
Yes. It's going to be available October 10th. It's currently available for pre order now.
awesome, cool, and it's available like Amazon and like everywhere
Oh,
basically.
yeah. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Nook, um, Kobo, Apple Books or iBooks. I'm not sure what exactly that's called. And I just finished formatting the paperback edition, so very soon you'll also be able to order paperbacks as well.
Awesome, awesome. Well, it's a really good book. I think it's going to be very popular, and thank you very much. I think been this has been very informative for me.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for the interview, Berthold. Nice to meet you face to face. Finally.